Hey, how you doing everybody? This is Adam from developphp.com here once again with another video tutorial. In this one I'm going to show you how to create Flash custom sliders using ActionScript 3.0. Because let's face it, the slider component that you can pull out from the components library in Flash is poopy. It's really poopy, people. You know it, I know it. Flash knows it, Adobe knows it, everybody knows it. So I'm going to show you how to make custom sliders. And it's like right now, you're watching this video on YouTube. You go down there to the volume. You adjust the volume, it's a little slidey thing. I'm going to show you how to make that in Flash. Just like the guy who programmed that Flash player for YouTube created his little slidey thing for the volume. And this one goes right in line with our multimedia programming tutorials for sound programming in ActionScript 3.0. But I'm going to make it like a separate tutorial because it's very multifunctional, multi-purpose. It can be used for many different things and not just sound or video programming. You can be in Flash CS3, CS4 or CS5 for this tutorial. Okay, let's create a new ActionScript 3 file. Now once inside, I'm going to grab the rectangle primitive tool and I'm going to draw out a rectangle primitive that is approximately 100 pixels wide by 20 pixels high. And don't worry guys, I'm going to explain every little thing along the way. You're going to be like, whoa, nobody ever really explained anything so thoroughly like this young man has. Wow! I'm going to change the color on that rectangle to something just like a light gray. Now I'm going to draw out an oval primitive on the same layer. And I'm going to make sure my oval primitive is 20 by 20. So now I have an oval primitive, and let me change the color on that so we can see it real good. And let's get the alpha all the way up because I had my alpha down. That means the alpha would be up on this one too. Let's put that up. There we go. So now we're going to make sure the coordinates match on these two guys by putting them both at x0, y0. And this is just so we don't get lost in where the pixels are. So you can see now that the circle is perfectly inside of the bar where the bar starts there. Because it has a height and a width of 20 and the bar is a height of 20. So everything's going to match up fine once you get the x and y coordinates matched up on those things. So let's right click this one, convert it to a symbol, make sure it's a movie clip symbol, registration top left. OK. Press Ctrl Shift down arrow key to move it to the back. There's the circle, right click that one now, convert to symbol, movie clip, registration top left again. OK. Now let's give that circle an instance name of slider knob. And let's give this rectangle an instance name of slider track. Now grab both of those. You can hold shift if you want to select multiple items. Convert all to a symbol. We're going to nest these two objects that we just created into a movie clip. Press OK. Now let's give this movie clip an instance name of my slider. So on the main scene, in the main timeline, you have a movie clip now that's called My Slider. Inside of it, you have slider track and slider knob. Those are both movie clips as well. So now we're going to put some code. We can put a new layer there and call it AS3. And put some code here that's going to affect these two items. That way we can drag them. So we're going to use simple drag and drop code to be able to drag this circle within the bounds of that slider track. Now before we even put any code in here, we can go back to scene 1, the main timeline there, and that's where the movie clip that holds everything is. And it's important to note that this can go anywhere you want now. You can put it anywhere you like. Use your arrow keys to drag it around, or just grab it and drag it around to put it anywhere you want on your stage. You don't have to keep it in the upper left hand corner like that once it's contained into a movie clip. Because once you contain it in a movie clip, you double click inside of it, you'll see that each one is still at x0, y0. See? That's all we need. So in the main scene where this little component, this little custom component is hanging out, it could be anywhere on this stage. And everything's going to still work correctly. So let's go back into that movie clip where these two items are. In the ActionScript 3 layer, press F9 to open your Actions panel, or you can go up to Window Actions. And here's the code that you want to apply. Now I'm going to zoom in on it real good, and it'll help if you full screen this and watch it at the most clear value. I think it's 720p to see it the best. That way you can distinguish semicolons from commas and periods, equal signs, and all that stuff. You can see all that real clearly. And I'm also going to have the code for this available at Develop PHP, so a link for the code that you can copy and paste for this is going to be in the description of this video. But if you want to just type it out yourself real quick, there it is. So let's see what happens when we test this now. See, now you see I can drag that circle tightly within those bounds. You see that it doesn't go outside of those bounds at all. And that's what I wanted. Now let me explain this code to you. Alright, so what we're doing here is, you know, we have those two items on stage. One is called slider knob. That's this little guy. The other one's called slider track. So what we're doing is grabbing the slider knob's width and the slider track's width, and we're packing those into two variables called knob width and track width. Those are number type variables. Now we're creating another variable for the track X, and the slider track X position really in this case is going to be 0, but we're doing it dynamically just to show you how to do it dynamically there. But that's equal to 0. So basically you could have a 0 there and that would still work the same, I believe. Now the bound width is the track width minus the knob width. So this thing is 100 pixels wide. This is 20 pixels wide. So that would give us a value of 80 for this bounds width. And then we can apply a bounds rectangle, which the ActionScript 3.0 help file shows you how to apply bounds rectangle to your dragging code. That way objects can't be dragged outside of the bounds that you specify. So I'm using these values to create a bounds rectangle using the track X, which I just told you how we got that value. This is 0. This is 0. Bounds width, we just figured out, is 80. And this is a 0 as well. So that gives me a bounds rectangle of 80 wide. And that's what I wanted. Then we simply add an event listener to the slider knob, which is a little round circle. And that's for mouse down. So when somebody puts the mouse down and holds it down, we start the dragging. And that's a function called start dragging. And here's that function right here. And inside of that function, the slider knob.startDrag method is applied. And we're using the bounds rectangle there to keep it within a bounded space. Then we simply, down here, this is for when somebody lets go of the little knob and they want to stop dragging. So we add an event listener for mouse up and mouse out to fire off the same function, which is called stop dragging here. And what happens inside of that function is we say slider knob.stopDrag. Now all we have to do is make it to where this represents a value of 0 when it's all the way over here. And when it's all the way over here, that represents a value of 100. And then in between, we have 1 to 99 in all this range. And this, I'm going to show you how you can make this as long as you want, this track. So let's go inside of this movie clip here that is the slider track. I'm going to show you how to put a more visual track in there. Let's get a rectangle primitive. Let's draw it out. And mine is, let's change the color to black. Something nice and dark. I'm going to put the height on about, I don't know, maybe 2. Just so it's a nice lean little track. And the width is 100, matching the width of that rectangle that's there already. And this is my slider track. That's just for decoration. That line I put in. Alright, so back here where you have the knob and the track again, if you press Control Enter, you'll see that you have a nice, dark, thin track there to move that circle along. Kind of like the Windows Media Player volume control. And you can go in here and you can put the alpha for this color all the way down. That way you can't even see it if you want. You have something like that. So let's go back here where we have our code for the dragging. We have our symbols right there. You can go inside of this slider knob and convert this to a button symbol. And I'll show you what that does. Watch. Press Control Enter. And you'll see now that you have the little hand pointer. When somebody goes over it, it gives them the hand symbol indication that they can interact with that object. And you can also make the hit state for that a little bigger without affecting its size. So if you double click inside, make a new layer, go to the hit state on that new layer, press F6, and you can just put a rectangle there as big as you want or as wide as you want. So let's just put it right here for now, right over that shape. I'm going to take a rectangle, I'm going to plop it right there. I'm going to take the alpha down in that rectangle I just put in so I can see through it. I'm going to put it right where I want it. And now I'm going to make sure it's only on the hit state. So I'm going to drag this select this and drag it over to the hit frame. So now you'll have something like that. Basically, you want it only on the hit frame. That way it doesn't affect the size of the button, but it gives the button a more clickable area. I'll show you what I mean. See, if I'm over here, oh, we have to make sure this extends. Press F5 on that layer. So now if I press Control Enter, you'll see that now you have a bigger click area or grab area for that little circle thing, and that's what you want, because sometimes those little knobs that you create are very, very small. So now I can grab it right here and drag it if I want, or on it, and it just helps me hold on to it better too. But it won't affect your drag, you see? It's still within the same bounds. Okay, let's go back here to symbol 3 where we were, where we have the code for the dragging here. Now we're going to go one symbol up into the main scene. Now we're on the main timeline, the root of the Flash file. What I'm going to do is put out a dynamic text field here. I'm going to name it status_txt. Make it any size I want. Make sure I have the color that I want. Let's make sure that alpha is up all the way, so I'll have a solid black. Now I'm going to add another layer here, or you can put the code right on this same layer. This is how you're going to access the value of where this little knob is being dragged within the track. I'll show you how to access the value of this like it was a component. So in layer 2 here, let's name this one AS3 as well, so we don't get confused. Let's open the Actions panel and type in this code. Now what Enter Frame Event does is it allows you to maybe listen for something many times per second, or it allows you to animate something over time. And depending on your frame rate, that determines how fast. Mine is going 30 frames per second. That determines how fast your Enter Frame Event will fire off. So mine's going to be firing off 30 times a second. So within that onEnter Frame event, what we're doing is putting a value into this status text field right here. The first thing we do is create a variable called slider value, and that's going to be uint, and I made it uint type and not number because I didn't want it to have any decimal points. If you had this saying number, actually here I have to remove this divided by 3. I'm going to put that back in just a second when I show you how to extend the length of your track. But right now we don't need that divided by 3. And the reason why we're using uint, like I was just explaining, is because we don't want this number that we gather here from the sliderknobs.x to have any decimal places. We want it to be a round number. Now the number you're going to get using this code right here is always going to be a round number. But if you do anything like divided by 2, or you divide it by 3 or 4, it's going to have a decimal point to the number. So what you can do is use uint instead of number type variable to make sure that that decimal never even comes into play. So instead of using math.floor or math.ceil, you can use uint to forego having to use that kind of code to round that number, to round any decimals into a whole solid number. So initially you create the variable for the slider value, and this is going to be before your Enter Frame event really ever fires off. You're going to see where the slider knobs.x position is inside of that My Slider clip here. Remember, we named this whole clip My Slider. So this code is going into My Slider, accessing the slider knobs.x position right off the bat. But this number is going to change here because people are able to slide and drag that knob along that track. So in the onEnter Frame event, you want to be listening for that, where that knob is at all times if somebody happens to drag it. And then you change what's in the status text field. Slider position is equal to the slider value variable. Now let's see what we get. Press Control Enter. You see? And you'll notice that it's only going to go from 0 to 80. And I'll show you how to fix that. That's no problem. Now the reason why it only goes to 80 is because of the width of that knob. So let's double click inside of My Slider clip. And there's the knob, there's the track. Now the knob, you can see, is 20 pixels wide. So let's extend our track 20 pixels. So let's make sure we grab both of these rectangles in here. Grab the width property and make it 120. Now watch what happens. It's a very easy fix. It goes all the way to 100 now. So we've achieved our first goal, creating a little knob that we can drag along a track that has a starting position of 0 and an ending position of 100 with all the values in between. And you can see how it's assembled, and I'm going to have this source file free for download at developphp.com. So you'll be able to get to the code. You'll also be able to get to the actual working file that I create here in the tutorial. Now let me show you how to easily extend this thing. Let's go into the slider track again, and instead of, make sure we're in the inner timeline of that. Here, let me bring this alpha up so you guys can see what's going on. So you're just manipulating the shape's width. See, these are not movie clip symbols, these are just those shapes that we had, the two rectangles inside of the slider track. I'm going to make those, say, 320 instead of 120. So now I'm going to go back into symbol 3, actually back into scene 1, where we have the code that's listening in the onEnterFrame event. And here I'm going to reapply that divided by 3. So if yours was 220, you would make this divided by 2. So I'm going to divide mine by 3. I'm going to make sure I add that here too. And remember, you don't have to add any rounding code for this equation because you're using uint. If you were using a number type variable here, you would have to round this code using math.floor or math.ceil. So now let's see what that does. We should get 0 here, 100 be all the way at the end over here now. So you see how that works? So that's how you can customize the look and the length of your slider. So say you wanted this to be a rectangle instead of a circle. Like the YouTube volume slider is just a very thin rectangle. You can change slider knob from being a circle to a rectangle there, and instead of being 20 wide, it might only be 5 or 6 pixels wide. That means you make your slider bar 306, or however many pixels wide your knob is, that's how many pixels you overcompensate your slider bar for. Does that make sense? It's very easy to do it that way, I think. So we can slide this thing along this bar, and that's all nice and everything, but we click here. Really what we want to happen is for this circle to go to the position that we specify when we click down on the track. And that's very simple code. I'll show you how to do that right now. So make sure you're inside the movie clip where you can grab the slider knob and the slider track, and in the code there, open that up. We're going to add one more little section of code, a couple of lines. Now what we're doing is adding an event listener to the slider track. That's this guy here. Adding an event listener of mouse event click. And the function that's going to fire off upon mouse click is snap2. And here's that function right there, function snap2. So inside of function snap2, we're commanding a text field in the parent movie clip. So if I go into the parent movie clip, that's right here with all these things. So I'm going to put another text field there because I need one. And I'm going to call it mouse_txt, M-O-U-S-E _txt, and that's going to read my mouse position whenever I click in that track. So let's go back into this movie clip here. The reason why we have movie clip parent code in use here is so we can go up one parent movie clip and hit that mouse_txt text field to give it a value whatever we want. So when somebody clicks down, we want to record what the mouse X value is the moment they click down. And here's a little if condition that will make sure that, so let's say somebody clicks right here, you want to make sure that your circle, your little knob, doesn't go further than the bounds. So I put a little math in there in the if condition to say if the mouse X is less than the bound width, which is the value we got here, and mouse X is greater than the knob width, then we can move the slider knob X position to match the user's mouse X position. So it gives me this. Watch when I click here. See? And it won't let you click too far towards the end. See right here? It won't let me do anything. It's not clicking. Only if you're a certain ways in to the track, like right here or right there, but not too close to the end so the circle doesn't go overboard. And it's really more effective if you have a little bar like YouTube's slider. Their volume slider is a little rectangular thin sliver. But you can see as I'm clicking, it's going wherever I command it to, and it also records the slider position perfectly, 0 to 100. Okay, so that's how you program custom sliders. And we're going to be putting this functionality into effect in our sound programming and video programming video tutorials, where we're showing how to build multimedia players for playing MP3 files or FLVs online. You're making your own custom players.